Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be our welcome for the next hour. Guys, you are in for a real treat. We have with us a legend and an icon, Walter Block. Walter is the author of over 24 books, including Defending the Undefendable. You are a senior fellow at the Mises Institute. You've written literally hundreds of peer-reviewed articles. You're an economics professor at Loyola. You studied, or excuse me, you were converted to libertarianism and anarchism by Ayn Rand and Murray Rothbard personally. Um, Op-eds in the New York Times, which is failing badly. And now at the tender, you're very famous for your view of evictionism, which is a unique perspective on how to reconcile anarchism and abortion. And now at the tender age of 82, you have been evicted from libertarianism by the king of libertarianism, Hans Hermann Hoppe. Get out, go back to Scotland. Now I'm assuming, because of your support of Israel, I'm assuming you're going to join the ADL and the Democratic Socialists of America, where you belong. Get the F out. So, Walter, I don't even know where to start because we have so much to discuss. Thank you so much for taking the time to come here. I really try to avoid having libertarians on the show whenever possible, but I do love drama. So I'm like, all right, let's get Walter on and show him the respect he's due. I had lunch yesterday with someone that my listeners are familiar with, Tom Woods, who's a very failed podcaster. And he, of course, speaks extremely highly of you, as well as everyone else I know does, except for one exception. I want to start at the beginning, to be honest. We could get to the drama now, which is secondary. Can you please tell us what Ayn Rand and Murray Rothbard were like in person?
Before I do, I have to make one correction. I am no longer a senior fellow at the Mises Institute.
Oh, when did that happen?
I've been kicked out of my senior fellowship, which I've had for, I don't know, more decades than I want to mention. The reason Tom DiLorenzo is the new president of the Mises Institute, and he wrote me a very acerbic letter saying that since our views on war are different, too different, I am no longer a senior fellow at the Mises Institute. I wrote back to him saying that our views on war are the same. Namely, we all libertarians, we're not pacifists, we're not anti-war. We are only opposed to offensive war, but we favor defensive war. So if country A attacks country B, gratuitously with no justification whatsoever, we take the side of country B because country B is fighting a defensive war. So I think Tom was wrong when he said that my views and the views of the Mises Institute on war are different. No, they're the same. However, there is a big difference between the views of many people associated with the Mises Institute, Lou Rockwell and Hans Hoppe and other people, on the Israeli-Hamas war. There, I would certainly agree that there is a difference. And on the basis of that, not on the basis of war, I am no longer a senior fellow at the Mises Institute. I'm sorry, I have to correct you.
Are you associated with them at all anymore?
Well, I was at the AERC, the Austrian Economic Research Conference, and I have been invited in the future, I think in October, to some supporters conference. I don't know if they'll rescind that or not, but I have been invited, and I wasn't told that it is rescinded, so I'm going to go there, I guess. Lou Rockwell still publishes me on lourockwell.com maybe once a week. So I still have some connection, but no official connection. Whereas before I was a senior fellow at the Mises Institute, and I am no longer in that role.
And they did pull you from the website.
Oh, did they? I didn't know that.
It's on the web. You're not on the website. Wait, I'm looking. Yeah, you're not on the website anymore. They have a list of all their senior fellows. Let's go. Yeah, you're not here.
Oh, I see. The website for senior fellows.
Correct.
That is eminently reasonable. Since I'm no longer a senior fellow, I should not be listed as one.
So let's start talking about Rand, because she was always described as being very intimidating in person. And I'm sure as a kid, meeting Ayn Rand was a very big deal at the time. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, let me give you a little bit of background. I overlapped with Bernie Sanders 4 years in Madison High School and 1 year at Brooklyn College. And we were on the track team together. We were sort of buddies, and my views and his were indistinguishable. I was a sort of pinko commie socialist like he is. I changed a bit. He didn't.
Is that the invisible hand, Walter?
Then what happened is Ayn Rand came to Brooklyn College to speak, and I came to boo and hiss her. And this was 1950, maybe 1961, something like
Wait,
that.
wait, wait. You actually went there with the intention of being this obnoxious college kid who's going to put her in her place?
No, no, no. It's a little different nowadays. When you are obnoxious, what you do is you prevent them from speaking. In those days, it was much more I don't know what polite. Namely, you would have a slight little boo or a hiss when she said something that capitalism is great, and then she could speak. So there was no interference. It was just I and all the other commie socialists were exhibiting our disagreement with capitalism, but it was done politely. This was a very different epoch than nowadays when when Charles Murray comes to speak, you don't let him speak and you try
Right.
to physically abuse him. Okay, so I sat through the speech, and at the end of the speech, they announced that the Ayn Rand Study Club that had invited her to speak was having a lunch in her honor, and anyone could come. And I wanted to convert her to socialism. So I came to the lunch, and it was a long, long table, maybe 50 people on each side, and she was sitting at the head of the table, and the only empty seats were way at the other end of the table. And I sat down and I said, socialism is the way to go to my neighbor, and capitalism is evil. And he said, well, I don't really know all that much about it, but the people who do are at the other end of the table. So I went to the other end of the table and I stuck my head in between Eins and.
Wait, hold on. I got to interrupt because I just love this like chutzpah, right? Which I can relate to as a Brooklyn Jewish kid from back in the day. That you're like, this Ayn Rand lady, she doesn't know what's up. I'm going to sit her down and she's going to get a lesson and her head's going to spin and she's going to thank me for saving her from her evil stupidity. That was the mindset, yes?
Roughly, yes. No, not roughly, exactly. We're both Brooklyn Jewish kids, so we are on the same wavelength. So I
Okay.
stuck my head between Eins and Nathan's, and the other people were there, Leonard Peikoff and Alan Greenspan and the whole gang there. And Brandon was very, very nice. He said, look, there's
Oh,
no room at the table here for you to sit, but I'll come to the other end of the table and I'll talk to you under two conditions. One condition is you don't allow this to elapse with one discussion, but we keep going until we settle this.
oh,
And I agreed. And the second one is I have to read two books. One was Atlas Shrugged, and the other was Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. And I read the books, and I couldn't put Atlas Shrugged down. I mean, I still think that's the best novel ever written. I'm a big fan of Atlas Shrugged.
I know. The Fountainhead's a better novel.
Okay, well, we can
That's,
agree to
uh,
disagree on
yeah.
that. You're objectively wrong.
Are you going to sit me down and educate me like you did Miss Rand?
So I went to Brandon's house. I went to Rand's house,
Wait,
and
okay.
4 or 5 times, and I read the books, and I was converted. I was not a Randian. I never understood the metaphysics and epistemology and all that, and why Beethoven was evil. I never could understand that.
Mozart was evil. Beethoven was good, I think.
No, no, no. Beethoven was evil, and Mozart was a red.
Oh yeah, yes. Okay, yeah. Yes.
um, uh, and I wasn't. I mean, I was not a Randian in that sense, but I certainly agreed with their economics. The Henry Hazlitt really knocked me for a loop. And then what happened is I went to the NBI, the Nathaniel Brannan Institute.
Wait, I
And
gotta interrupt you because I think it's important for people listening to this to understand how wonderful that Henry Hazlitt book is. So let me
oh,
break it down a little, right? Because it's called Economics in One Lesson. I have a copy of one of Mises's books signed to Hazlitt in my library, which is like a crown jewel of my collection. And Hazlitt takes Bastiat's lesson of the broken window. And the idea is he talks about the seen and the unseen, which you also did in your book, Defending the Undefendable, in many ways, where bad economics is someone breaks a window, You have to buy a window. Look, you're making work for the window maker. This is an economic good. It's like this midwit, marginally intelligent people like, aha, you see, you're looking at things at surface value. But a good economist will look at things beyond the subsurface and be like, sure, you have to buy a window, but that money you spent on windows could have been spent on food, sweaters, going to the movies. So no one's gaining anything because the sweater maker's losing and the chef or the movie theater owner is losing. So it's not a net gain at all. You're just out one window. So, and then he takes in this book, it's a great book for anyone, seriously. He just applies it to different subjects. He goes, this is what rent control, I think he does inflation. This is what is seen and this is what is not seen. Inflation is another very obvious one. Well, if you just, because a lot of people are like, why doesn't the government just print more money? Right? Because that's it. Like, it makes common sense, right? Just print. People don't have money, give them money, right? And what happens is when you have more and more money, the value of each dollar is less, which means prices go up. So it's always going to be a net loss. So I can see why. And for people who haven't read it, I cannot endorse it enough. Rand thought the world of that book. And obviously, it was life altering for you. And it still holds up enormously almost a century after it's been written.
Yeah, my book, Defending the Undefendable, is my homage to that book. What
Yeah.
Hazlitt had was one lesson, and he applied it to 35 or whatever, 3 dozen or so issues. Well, my Defending the Undefendable was very similar, at least in my mind. I had one principle, the non aggression principle of libertarianism, and I applied it to 35 different issues as well. So I can't agree with you more about the importance of those two books. And those were the two books that Brandon gave me. And Ayn Rand and Brandon were very, very nice to new beginners
Wow.
like
Okay.
me. They were very sweet, very kind. And, I was a Bernie Sanders type socialist, and they
Yeah.
invited me to their houses, and they would talk to me, and it was very lovely. Then I went to the Nathaniel Branden Institute, and it was very different. This was supposedly for people who were already cognoscenti on the objectivism. And if you asked Ayn Rand a question after her lecture, like a softball question, like on page 42 of this, you said that, could you elaborate? That would be fine. But if you said on page 42, you said this, and on page 93, you said that, and I see a contradiction, you know what she would do?
But
She would kick you out of the meeting. I mean, this was just
wait,
amazing.
seriously?
She would literally say, "Get out," and you're off the mailing list. And
In those words?
yeah, specifically, yes, explicitly, and this was cultish. I mean, if you disagree with her, I mean, this is a polite question.
Guys, life can be stressful, it can be overwhelming, and it's not just your mind that suffers when you're feeling tense and anxious, because stress can make a mess of your digestion and immune system too. But here's the thing, you can handle it with the help of Just Thrive Probiotic and their other product, Just Calm. Guys, let's talk about stress for a moment. Since 2020, 2 out of 3 people report feeling extreme stress. More than 80% of people say stress is affecting their physical health, and 73% believe stress is impacting their mental health, and over half of people have trouble sleeping because of stress. Exercise, meditation, and healthy diet, they're all important. But in our plugged in, constantly on modern world, to really get on top of stress, we could all use some help, and that's where Just Calm comes into play. So Just Calm's exclusive mood lifting blend is clinically proven to help you relax and breathe a little easier in as little as 4 weeks. And for the next level mood and immune support, use Just Thrive Probiotic, which is award winning. It not only has 1,000 times better survivability than most probiotics, but this spore probiotic banishes bloat and constipation so your gut can produce more of serotonin, which is the happy hormone. So with Just Calm and Just Thrive's probiotic, you'll have the ultimate stress fighting duo to help you win the day every day. And with a money back guarantee, what do you have to lose? And for a limited time, you can save 20% off site-wide at justthrivehealth.com with promo code WELCOME. And to learn more about Just Thrive Health and all their clinically backed products, don't miss my special episode where I interviewed Tina Anderson, who is the CEO and co-founder. Take control today with Just Thrive. Folks, I want to talk to you a bit about fastgrowingtrees.com. Did you know Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the US? They've got more than 10,000 different kinds of plants and over 2 million happy customers in the US. They've got everything you could possibly want: fruit trees, palm trees, evergreens, houseplants, and so much more. And whatever you're interested in, they have it for you. So find the perfect fit for your climate and space. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants are shipped directly to your door in 1 to 2 days. And along with their 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee, they offer free plant consultation forever. And they were very, very smart because they sent me a little gift certificate and they said, buy whatever you want. And I bought a tree and it came to my house and I put on my stoop and it's doing great. So I'm delighted to be able to endorse fastgrowingtrees.com. Whether you're looking to add some privacy, shade, or natural beauty to your yard, Fast Growing Trees has in-house experts ready to help you make the right selection. With growing and care advice available 24/7, you can talk to a plant expert about your soil type, landscape design, how to take care of your plants, and everything else you need. No green thumb required. This spring, they have the best deals online, up to half off on select plants and other deals. And listeners to the show get an additional 15% off their first purchase. All you got to do is use code WELCOME at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using code WELCOME at checkout. Go to fastgrowingtrees.com, code WELCOME. Offers valid for limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. Let's get back to the show. Hold on, let me ask. Hold on, because it's not even disagreeing with her. Because I could agree with your conclusion and say, hey, help me understand, help me reconcile these two things. They seem contradictory to me. That's not even disagreeing. That's saying, explain it to me. Or even if you did disagree, it's just like, I think, you know what it is? I know how Ayn Rand thinks. I think what she's perceiving is you saying you're wrong. And you don't realize you're wrong. So it's doubly an insult in her mind.
Yeah,
So that's why she's like, this is my house. You don't come here to tell me I'm wrong. Come here to learn, I think was her mindset.
I think you're absolutely right. But that was just for the cognoscenti who were
Yeah, yeah.
supposedly in. Whereas if it's a totally new person and you said something like that, you would be very gentle. So it's sort of a schizophrenic, different way of dealing with people. Very strange. Uh, then what happened? I was
Wait,
now.
wait, let me ask you also. So she didn't have, so this, what kind of, like when you're in the room with her, you're saying she's friendly, right? Did
Yeah.
she have this stature about her, or was she like kind of chummy? Like, what's her vibe like?
Well, she was she was something special. I mean, you look at her and her eyes were flashing. I don't know how
Okay.
else to express it, but she dominated the room with her little pinky. She was really something special. I mean, she had charisma, as did Bernie Sanders, even when he was a high school student. You don't get to be a senator unless you've got some charisma, and you don't get to be a world famous person like her without having something going. And she just exuded it.
Okay.
You just take one look at her and you have to realize that you're in the presence of a very famous person.
Okay.
Well, then to continue my odyssey, I was now a limited government libertarian,
Right.
and I now found myself at Columbia University, which is pretty famous nowadays, trying to get a PhD in economics. And Larry Moss, a fellow student of mine, said, "You must meet Murray Rothbard. He's an anarchist." And I said, "Anarchist? I don't want to meet an anarchist because, anarchism is crazy." And finally, Larry Moss and his
Wait,
roommate.
hold on, hold on. I just got to laugh because 5 minutes ago you're a commie. Right now you're like a basically constitutionalist libertarian, and now it's like, let's talk this anarchism. That's crazy. Give me back to my commie friends. They're the sane ones.
Well, this wasn't 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes
Sure,
of telling, but it took a year or two for me to go from Brooklyn College to Columbia.
sure.
I was also taking two masters, one in economics, one in philosophy, because I
Okay.
didn't know which was the best vehicle to promote limited government libertarianism or free enterprise. And I finally decided it was economics, and I went to Columbia to get a PhD. And Larry Moss and his roommate Jerry Wallows ganged up on me and said, "You must meet Murray Rothbard." And the way they described him, I figured he was a guy like 6'5" and muscles and a six pack, and in one hand he'd have a gun and another a spear, and it was this little fat guy who the big problem with Murray that I had was laughing. I mean, you get stomach cramps from laughing. I mean, he was just so funny. And he converted me into anarchism in about 10 minutes. He said, look, you believe in privatizing the post office, and here are the Hazlitt reasons. And you believe in, privatizing public libraries, and here are the reasons, and the sanitation. Well, why not the cops? Why not privatize courts, and talked about private courts? And the light bulb went over my head, and I was now sort of a Rothbardian anarcho-capitalist, and I was part of Murray Rothbard's living room group, and this was, I guess, what set me on the present path that I'm on now, namely promoting liberty and Austrian economics. Austrian economics took me a little longer because Gary Becker was my dissertation advisor and my mentor at Columbia, Nobel Prize winner in economics. And he later went off to Chicago. And I used to say, there's not room for me and Gary. Gary had to leave. He went to Chicago. But Murray has been a major influence. He was my mentor, my friend, and I revere him in many, many ways. But, Murray was not a cultist. I must have, 10 disagreements with Murray on immigration, on abortion, on voluntary slavery. And he never even came within a million miles of breaking with me just because we disagreed on something. And everything that Murray did to me, I try to do with my students. Get them to call me by my first name, as Murray insisted that I call him Murray. I didn't want to call him
Oh
Murray. I
God,
mean,
I
he
find
was.
that I find that unconscionable. I'm not even kidding. Like I hate it when people or strangers start getting chummy with me. What is the advantage for you for that? I don't understand it. Maybe it's it could be because was born in the Soviet Union and there's like a different tense for you. There's the formal and the familiar. And when strangers come at you with the familiar tense, it's like, buddy, I don't know you. Like take a deep breath. Can you explain this to me? It's totally foreign to my thinking.
Well, I mean, I didn't have my PhD yet when I first met
Okay.
Murray. I was just getting it. I had an ABD, all but dissertation, and I would call him Professor Rothbard.
Right.
And he said, call me Murray. And it was hard for me to do that.
Yeah.
And I sort of emulate him in many, many different ways. And with my present students, I ask them to call me Walter. They're not comfortable doing that, but I emulate Murray in so many, many different ways.
But
Because,
what does that gain you? Or like why you're not just copying him for the sake of copying him. You disagree with him on other things.
oh, yeah, on some substantive issues, I disagree with him, but he and I are very similar. We're both short, fat Jews. We both married Christian girls who were taller than us. We both got PhDs at Columbia. We're both anarcho-capitalists. I think I'm his only co-author. I'm not sure about that, but I am a co-author of his, and very few people are. I think I'm the only one. I'm not sure about that. But I just revere him, and I just naturally emulate him in many
Okay.
different ways.
Okay. That's as good. Are you intentionally going to try to gain more weight to get that kind of to get that kind of spherical look? Where's the bow tie, Walter? You're a fraud. This is why you get kicked out of visas. There's no bow tie, you phony.
I, I, I,
Um,
can, I can see I'm going to have the same trouble with you as I have with Murray, laughing all the time.
get out. I give you like Rand too. Get out. Get out. I do not approve of surprises. Um, was there a moment, just going back to Rand, where you're like, listen, this woman's contributions were enormous and amazing, but I can't be around these people?
Yeah, I sort of had a little approach avoidance with her and their group because they were the only libertarians I knew.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'd come for a couple of weeks, and then I'd get disgusted, and then I'd abjure them for a month or two, and then I would come back because I knew no other libertarians, and they were
yeah.
the only ones, and I missed that. And then finally, I got involved with Murray and his living room crowd, and
Right.
Leonard Liggio and Ralph Raico and Ron Hamaway and Walter Grinder and a whole bunch of other people, and they became my friends.
Can I tell you a Walter Grinder story? This is really funny. I have not told this one, and it's from '97. So Walter Grinder wrote the introduction to a re-release of Our Enemy the State by Albert J. Nock. And I'm a book collector. I love books. I've got Rand's copy of The Fountainhead, by the way. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, Mr. Block. Dr. Block, excuse me. Given the proper respect.
Just watch that. I'm watching you.
And I had a copy of Our Enemy the State with Walter being having written the foreword, and he was associated in some way with the Cato Institute, where I had been an intern. And I went to him to just sign the book, and ask him questions about his career. And as we're doing this, he's taking the book. It's a hardcover, and he just keeps cracking the spine throughout because he's insisting that this is good for the book's longevity. And for me, as a book collector, when you see someone just cracking a book's spine, it's almost, I'd rather see like a child's arms being broken. I'm not serious, but kinda. And I'm just sitting there as this intern as he's just snapping this book, and I'm just like, oh my God, the noise. And it traumatized. I have PTSD to this day. But he could not have been more personable and friendly, to just some dumb, wet behind the ears kid.
No, he was one of my friends, one of my best friends. He unfortunately passed away a few years ago, but he never published much, but he had great influence verbally with a lot of followers of his. And he was a special friend of mine.
Were you friends with Roy Childs as well?
Oh, yes, yes. Roy
Can,
Charles and I were buddies. Yeah,
so
sure.
for people who don't know, Roy Childs was a very heavy set guy. He wrote very famously an open letter to Ayn Rand, where he tried to convert Rand to anarchism. She did not bother to reply. Apparently, years later, towards the end, he decided to renounce anarchism, or he just did not find it compelling anymore. I heard a story. I can tell it now because he's long deceased, that they sent him to fat camp and he escaped like in the middle of the night and fled for the hills. And I'll tell another secret, which is Roy Childs's library became the basis of the Cato Institute's library, right? And if you're an intern, you could go and borrow the books and read them all. Well, that was where I first read Max Stirner's Ego and His Own. It was Roy Childs's copy. And that book really influenced me so much that I know you're gonna not like this. I stole it and I bought a used copy and replaced it. So the one in the Cato Institute library is not Roy Childs' copy. I have it. I think it has his notes in it as well. But and you'll never get it back, Cato Institute. I'm gonna be buried with it.
Well, I think it's okay to not steal a book from a public library, but liberate one. But I'm not
Yes.
sure. I'm not sure about a. Well, I am sure about a private institution, but
Yes.
I'll let you deal with that one.
Folks, did you know that your temperature at night can have one of the greatest impacts on your sleep quality? So if you wake up too hot or too cold, I highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. They're inspired by NASA, and Miracle Made uses silver-infused fabrics and makes temperature-regulating bedding so you can sleep at night with the perfect temperature all night long. These sheets are infused with silver that prevents up to 99.7% of bacterial growth. It lets them stay cleaner and fresher up to 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. And they're very comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands and feel as nice, if not nicer, than sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Stop sleeping in bacteria because it can clog your pores. It causes breakouts and acne. Sleep clean with Miracle. Go to trymiracle.com/malice to try the sheets today. Whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use promo code MALICE at checkout, you get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. They're so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you aren't 100% satisfied, full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/malice and use code MALICE to get your free 3-piece towel set. Save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/malice to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. Folks, springtime is here, and there is no better time to have a fresh start and break your old habits. And I'm talking about our sponsor, Fume. They look at the problem in a different way. Not everything that's a bad habit is wrong. So instead of a drastic and uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from your habit? And I'm talking about something that I can't get too specific about that a lot of people do starting in high school, and gives them long-term health consequences. What Fume helps with that because it's an innovative, award-winning flavored air device. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. And instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses delicious flavors. You get it. Instead of bad, Fume is good. It's a habit you're free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habit easy. Your Fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting. So your fingers have something to do, which is helpful for de-stressing and anxiety while breaking that bad habit. Their newest thing is the Solano Fume. It's made with a premium walnut barrel and an onyx-coated mouthpiece, which has a slightly softer finish. Fume looks cool, it feels cool, and it tastes like drinking refreshing herbal tea. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. For a limited time, use my code MALICE to get a free gift with your journey pack. Head to tryfume.com, that's TRYFUM.com, and use code MALICE or scan the QR code on screen to get a free gift with your order today. Let's get back to the show. So Rothbard also, I heard differing accounts that he was this happy warrior, always upbeat, always having fun. But I've also heard accounts that he could be difficult and irascible. And then some people are like, no, that's never the case. Like, what was your experience? Because you've known him for decades.
Yes, my experience with him is that in person he was very amiable and affable with anyone and everyone.
Okay.
However, in writing, it was Jekyll and Hyde, Mr.
Yeah.
Jekyll and Dr. Hyde or whatever. He would be very tough on Galbraith or on Milton Friedman or on anyone with whom he disagreed. Not like Hans Hoppe with me, where he's calling me all sorts of names, but very, how shall I say it, sharp or radical. I mean, take his view on Milton Friedman. He's always polite. He never called Friedman any names or anything like that. But he said, look, here's where we disagree, and here's why Friedman is wrong. And he would do the same thing for Hayek and Nozick and and Rand and anyone else. So
wait, hold on. That's not entirely correct, because please correct me. I heard a story that Milton Friedman was giving a talk, and he was denigrating slightly Ludwig von Mises, who was Rothbard's mentor. And Rothbard got up in that audience and started cheering for Mises and interrupted the talk. Did that happen?
I was not a witness to that.
Okay.
I don't know about that, but I'm talking about in person, like
Sure,
if
sure.
you're in a salon or at a dinner.
Right, got it.
He would not be nasty in person. He was always very amiable, even with Murray Bookchin, who was a lefty, and they were trying to be buddies, or there was a time when they overlapped. He was nice to him in person, but when he wrote, he did not pull any punches. He let you have it right between the eyes, or whatever the expression is. So he was very tough, but polite and scholarly.
Okay. So another person who Rothbard mentored was Hans Hermann. I thought it was pronounced Hoppe. Is it Hoppe?
Uh, American would be Hoppe. I think the way he pronounces Hoppe.
Yeah. So were you guys friends? Like, what was your relationship like over the years?
With Hans, we were buddies, co-authors for 30, 40 years. I forget how many decades. We were both followers of Murray. And I have to tell a story about Murray
Please.
and Hans.
Please.
Murray was the head of the Rothbardian movement.
Yeah.
And
Mr. Libertarian.
And Murray predicated his libertarianism on natural rights.
Yeah.
And along comes Hans, a young kid. I don't know how old he was when he first came from Germany to the US, maybe 30 years old, 28, something like that. And Hans had an entirely different way of grounding libertarianism, and that was the argument from argument, or argumentation ethics. Now, look, if Ayn Rand was the head of her group and somebody came and she predicated all of her objectivism on A is A, and some young kid came along and said, no, A is all, wrong or weak, and here B is the key, she would have kicked them out of the movement. Well, the very same thing came along with Hans. Hans came along with argumentation ethics, and it really supplanted natural rights. And Murray's reaction: Hans is right. I was wrong. This shows something very important about Murray, that he was seeking the truth with a capital T. And when he saw something better than what he had been espousing, he just gave it up.
Wait, so Walter, let's keep score here. So far, Walter tries to convert Rand 0. Hans tries to get Rothbard 1. It's not looking good for you, my friend.
Well, the truth is the truth, and I regard Hans as a brilliant theoretician, not only of libertarianism but of Austrian economics. He's made very important contributions to both, as of course has Murray. And Hans and I were friends. I don't know how many co-authorships we have, maybe 4 or 5. He invited me to his
Property and
meeting
Freedom Society. Yeah.
in Turkey,
Bodrum. Yeah.
and we were buddies. But this Israeli Hamas thing, people look. I disagree with Hans and Murray on immigration, on abortion, on voluntary slavery, on a whole bunch of things, and there's been never any question of animosity. But all of a sudden, you get this Israel Hamas, and there's a lot of acerbic animosity between not just me and Hans, but a lot of people. There have been marriages that have been broken up. I think I'm pretty sure of that over Israel Hamas. It somehow has struck a chord.
So let's break that down, because let's talk about the issue and also the personality stuff here. I'm reminded very specifically of in 1980 when Ayn Rand refused to endorse Ronald Reagan despite having voted for Nixon, because her gatekeeping was no one who's against abortion can ever be a defender of individual rights. Which is a very weird position, because Ron Paul's just one very obvious counterexample. And the idea that Reagan, who ended up defeating the Soviet Union, couldn't have some kind of net positive contribution, certainly as compared to Richard Nixon, to me is kind of nuts. It's also kind of interesting to me to gatekeep as people who are advocates of private property when you don't own the gate. That a big key of property rights is, this is my house, and Walter, if you're in my house, you have to say, death to Israel, otherwise you can't come in. And you either say, okay, that's your preference, I'm not going to come to your house, or I will come to your house and say it, and whatever. It makes it pretty clear. So you and Rand, of course, was a complete Zionist, like off the charts. If you watch Rand Donahue, it's just the complete level of support for Israel as opposed to the Palestinians. I did, but you've been a Zionist for quite some time. This has only, and the other thing that really is kind of funny to me is Javier Milei, who is basically, on paper at least, a libertarian wet dream, who campaigning about F the state, in vulgar language, like death to these socialists, the government's the devil, dressing up as an ANCAP superhero. Well, he's a Zionist, so clearly nothing he's doing can possibly be good. So it's like, not only is there a refusal to win, it's also a refusal to take whatever wins you can get, which I think is very counterproductive mindset. You've had these views for quite some time, right? Has Hans ever been uncomfortable with them before to this level?
We never spoke about it. The first
Okay.
time, I think my book with Alan Fuderman came out in 2021. That would make it 3 years ago. And that was my first major Zionistic writing, if you want to put it that way. I've written often about Israel, but much less intensively throughout the years. So I have a paper trail before 2021. But Hans and I never discussed that. I mean, we discussed a lot of things, and out of the blue, Hans says that Walter is wrong, and not only is Walter wrong, but he's a moron and an idiot, and he's not a libertarian, and um, all of that in his very famous open letter to Walter Block. I forget if that's the exact title, but
Let
something
me
like
pull it.
that.
Let me pull it up, because I think it's of use to tell you what he said, because it would be very easy, and I think you would have no issue, and no one would, if the article just said Walter Block is wrong in Israel, period. And then it goes through how you don't, these are not incompatible with libertarian principles. You're completely wrong. You don't get it. I'm reminded vividly of when Kropotkin, who is like the father of anarcho-communism, he supported the fight against Germany in World War One, and all the other anarchists, quite understandably, like, "Are you crazy? Like, this is clearly like the war machine fighting the Kaiser. Who cares?" And ordinary people, the workers, are getting drafted. So this came out in January 31st. It's called An Open Letter to Walter Block. And he starts with saying, oh God, he's such a German because each of these sentences has like 8 clauses. And he just can't write like succinctly, but I'll read the first sentence. He goes, breaking up with a person you have known for more than 30 years, with whom you have participated in countless conferences and co-authored a couple of articles, even if only in the somewhat distant past, is not done lightly. Um, da, 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 da. And he goes, however, it becomes, if a person closely associated with your own name goes astray and falls into serious error, you may be compelled to publicly distance and disassociate yourself from this person in order to protect your own personal and intellectual reputation, along with Rothbard's and that of the entire libertarian intellectual edifice. Such is the case with Walter Block. And he says, you like to refer to yourself as the sweet and kind Walter, end quote. However, you've published materials that clearly disqualify you as a libertarian and Rothbardian and reveal him instead as an unhinged collectivist taken in by genocidal impulses, very much like Rand and the Randians, recently taken to task by Fernando Chiaca, I don't know who that is, rather than a sweet and kind person. So I would, what was your, how did you find out about this article and what was your reaction?
Well, I found out about it because it was on LouRockwell.com.
Okay.
And I am an avid reader of LouRockwell.com. And there it was, the lead article saying that Walter Block is an idiot, a moron, and evil, if I can put it very succinctly. And I was a little shocked. I want to contrast this with what David Gordon and Najoya did. David Gordon and Najoya did a book review of our 2021 book, and it was very polite. And it was very, they disagreed with us, but that's okay. But there was no venom. Whereas with Hans, there was a lot of venom. And I am uncomfortable with that sort of a thing. And in my reply that I co-authored with my co-author Alan Fuderman, we made sure that we didn't do that. That we would call him our learned colleague or our I don't know libertarian theorist or something, and we didn't call him a moron or an idiot or evil or anything like that. And I don't think he is evil or a moron. I mean, he's a brilliant man. He's one of the most creative contributors to Austrian economics and libertarianism.
But let me steel man his position, because from his perspective, I don't want to speak for him, but what I would gather is if you are sitting here and glibly defending genocide and the killing inevitably of tens of thousands of people, many of which are women and children, isn't this the point where you can't be polite and you have to be venomous because you have to completely eradicate this kind of argument from the discourse?
Well, my response to that is, and I think we said something like this in our response. We said, look, suppose I'll do it with you instead. I now have a knife, and I'm running at you, Michael, and I'm yelling, "Kill Michael!" And I've got blood in my eye, and I have my 2-year-old child, my son, strapped to me right here. And the only way you can stop me is by shooting me.
Well,
Let's.
I don't know. I think I could outrun you. You're in your 80s, or after all. I'm joking. Come on, man.
No, let's stipulate that you're up against the wall. There's no way out.
I understand. I
You
understand.
can't run away. You can't dodge me. The only way you can stop me is by shooting me. But I happen to have my toddler. My son is now 46, but he was 2 years old when he was 2 years old, and I've got him strapped right here in a baby carrier. And the only way you can stop me is by shooting me, and the only way you can shoot me is right through him. And he's innocent. He's only 2 years old. Well, what are you going to do? Are you going to let me kill you, or are you going to shoot me? And what I say is, you have every right to shoot me because I am going to kill you, and you're innocent, and I'm not innocent. I'm a would-be murderer. And what Hamas does is they use the Gazans as shields. They embed themselves amongst them. They put their rocket launchers in the middle of a hospital. They put their tunnels under a school. And what Hans is saying, and what all these people who are saying that Israel is guilty of genocide are saying, is Israel has no right to defend itself. Because the only way they can defend themselves is to obliterate Hamas. And Hamas has their principles not only of killing all Israelis, but killing all Jews. That's their premise. And they make good on this attempt. They send rockets. They have these tunnels. They have suicide bombers. And the only way Israel can defend itself is by having collateral damage. Now, look, in every war there's collateral damage, but Israel is one of the only countries ever to, instead of sending a bomb first, they send a leaflet. And the leaflet says, go away from here because we're going to bomb here in 10 hours or whatever it is. I'm making it up, but that's roughly what the leaflet says.
Okay.
The U.S. military didn't do much of that. Germany didn't do much of that. Japan didn't do much of that. Israel does that. And yet somehow Israel is accused of genocide. No, whenever an innocent Gazan dies, it's due to Hamas.
Hi, it's Kellyanne Conway.
And I'm David Plouffe, and we have some surprising news. We're teaming up for a brand new podcast, The Campaign Managers.
I know what you're thinking. Why would Plouffe and Kellyanne do this?
Because frankly, Kellyanne, we disagree on just about every issue, except about what it takes to win a presidential campaign. Kellyanne ran Donald Trump's campaign. I ran Barack Obama's campaign. We understand things like early vote. We understand how to leverage an opportunity and how to play defense when you've made a mistake.
2024 is an election like none other. And David Plouffe and I are going to take you behind the scenes like no one else can.
We're going to lean into our one-of-a-kind experiences, really educate our listeners about what to keep an eye on, and discuss the current strategies and tactics that both campaigns are deploying on the campaign trail.
We're going to disagree, we're going to dissent, but we're going to deliver. You won't want to miss this unique pairing. Join us by listening to The Campaign Managers with Kellyanne Conway and David Plouffe.
The first episode is out May 22nd, available wherever you get your podcasts.
But I mean, I think the argument is there doesn't seem to be much, and perhaps understandably, appetite on the argument on the Israeli side to mitigate civilian casualties. And I also want to read his conclusion, because his conclusion seems to me extremely reasonable. As this is Hans speaking again. There is little a libertarian can do except raise his voice in favor of peace, talks, negotiations, and diplomacy. The Hamas leadership should be accused for having brought about through its terrorist actions the danger of some massive retaliation by a military far superior, and the Israeli leadership should be blamed for having failed blatantly in protecting its population owing to its apparently severely deficient surveillance agencies. The leadership of both gangs should be encouraged and pressured through public opinion to agree to an immediate truce, and at once negotiations concerning the return of the hostages held by Hamas should be started. That seems to me perfectly reasonable. Do you disagree with that?
Oh, very much so. I don't think that's reasonable at all.
Okay.
Look, what happened in 2005 with Gaza is there used to be a Jewish community there. And the Palestinian Authority was in charge then. They later had an election and Hamas won, and Hamas also had a little bit of a fight with the Palestinian Authority. And what happened was that Gaza was Judenfrei, Judenrein, no Jews.
Yeah.
The Israeli government compelled all the Jews, all the Israelis, to leave Gaza, and it was like a Palestinian state. They keep wanting to have a Palestinian state. They pretty much had a Palestinian state after 2005. And what did they do with their Palestinian state? What did they do with all the foreign aid that was given to them? Did they build desalination plants? Did they build buildings? Did they build schools? No, they built tunnels. They built rockets, and they kept shooting rockets over to the Israelis, and they kept sending suicide bombers over there to blow up a nightclub. And they kept doing things like that. And what Israel would do would be, they called it mowing the lawn. I'm not sure why they call it mowing the lawn. Namely, they would sort of bomb a little bit back, and then there would be peace, peace with quotes around it. And then finally, October 7th happened, and it was not just killing one or two people. It was very, very serious. Look, imagine if Canada did that to the United States. Every once in a while, Vancouver would bomb Seattle. Every once in a while, I don't know, Toronto would bomb Boston or something like that.
I endorse this. So you're using a better. These are maybe use some better examples.
What would
are they going to hit? If they're going to hit Cambridge, I mean, I'm signing up. I'm getting my maple leaf tattoo. Are you kidding me?
No, but more seriously, the U.S. wouldn't tolerate that, and the U.S. would go in and mop them up. And then suppose the UN said, well, no, we want peace. We don't. We want to allow Canada to attack the U.S., but we don't want the Americans to retaliate. America would give them the middle finger.
Yeah, but I think the point is, what does mop them up entail in this case? Because as you know, Hamas is very much intertwined with the population in Gaza. It's not like people have "I'm in Hamas" on their forehead. The level of support from the populace varies from fear and hatred of Hamas to outright support. And having, Israel just rain terror on, or I'm sorry, just, rain terror on Gaza isn't going to hurt Hamas's recruitment efforts among the Gazan population. So, like, how did you see this ending? I don't see, the thing that drives me crazy in popular parlance, because our politics is so much like professional wrestling where there's good guys and bad guys. It's like, let's take this out of Israel, talk about Ukraine, right? It's like, it's going to have to end in compromise, right? No one is saying we're going to go to Moscow and pull Putin out of office. No one is saying, well, Putin's going to have Ukraine as an adjunct to Russia. Someone's going to have to cut a deal, right? And this is one of the reasons HOPPE was such a favor of monarchism, because he's like, when you have, the total state, you have to have complete conquest. But when you had monarchs, they'd have an opportunity of compromise, right? No one is saying, or some people, no one is reasonably saying, okay, the Palestinians are going to take over all of Israel. And I don't think anyone was advocating, okay, kill all the Palestinians. So where does it end, in your opinion, or how could it end?
Well, let me comment on that very important point that you're making. First of all, Hans doesn't really favor monarchism. He just favors monarchism vis-a-vis democracy.
Yeah, he prefers monarchism. Yes. Okay, yeah.
Democracy, but
correct.
Not,
yes, correct.
To anarchism.
Yes.
Secondly, with regard to the analogy of Ukraine and Russia, here I'm a Russophile, or Ukrainophobe, or whatever. The way I see the situation was when East Germany and West Germany got together, they amalgamated.
Yeah.
There was the Warsaw Pact and there was NATO.
Right.
And what should have happened was peace should have been declared.
Yes.
And Warsaw Pact disbanded. NATO should have disbanded because there was peace.
Yes.
And also there was a promise made, a diplomatic promise made, that NATO would not move eastward.
Right.
And look, Russia has been invaded by the U.S. once or twice, and by Germany twice. And Russia doesn't really like to be invaded by Germany. I don't know. The Russians are weird. They just don't like to be invaded by Germany. Who knows why? They're just weirdos. And what happened instead was that NATO keeps creeping eastward. And in 2014, there was a Ukrainian government that was friendly toward Russia. And the U.S. and NATO overturned that government and put in this Jewish comedian, Zelensky, and he is not a big fan of Russia. Now, look, suppose that Brazil had invaded the United States many times, And now Brazil keeps creeping upward through Central America, and Mexico was friendly to the United States, and Brazil deposed the government of Mexico and put in an anti-U.S. Mexican. The U.S. would not be happy. And I don't have to resort to a hypothetical picking on Brazil. I can look at the Cuban Missile Crisis. At the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the U.S. had military bases all around Russia, in
Right.
Turkey and here and
Sure.
there and everywhere. And the
Nukes
Russians
pointing there, yeah.
and the Russians had one military base in Cuba, and the U.S. went apoplectic.
But we didn't invade.
There was a blockade. A blockade is an act
Sure.
of war. Blockade is an act of war, and that's what. Uh, so the point is, look at it from the Russian point of view. They've been invaded by Germany. They've been, and they didn't much like it. And Germany is part of NATO, and NATO keeps creeping closer and closer.
Yeah, but if I don't understand this argument, and here's something you'll agree with me, and this drives me crazy, because people like, let's suppose I disagree with your reasoning. That doesn't mean I'm supporter of Ukraine or Zelensky. You know what I mean? Like, I could say I disagree with this reasoning, doesn't mean I support the other side. But again, our politics has gotten so stupid that it's good guys versus bad guys, and therefore, if I don't like one side, I clearly must support the other side, do whatever they want. Let's just clarify that.
Oh, I agree with you there, and
Of
I
course, you
didn't.
understand. Yeah, no, just for the audience, because people have these mousetraps in their heads.
Oh, fair enough.
Because I didn't spend enough time denouncing Putin on Twitter, I'm called a Putin apologist, where it's like, I don't have a horse in this race.
Well, I have a horse in this race, and my horse is Russia.
Let me. My point is, if this argument is Putin is concerned, and I think that point is indisputable about NATO creeping east, how is moving Russia's borders west resolving that problem? Isn't that just exacerbating that problem?
Well, they disbanded the Warsaw Pact. NATO should be disbanded.
I agree, but NATO should be disbanded. But the point is, if his concern is NATO's getting closer and closer, why is he moving his border closer and closer to meet them?
Well, look, there were several provinces on eastern Ukraine that were mainly Russian speaking, and they wanted to secede from Ukraine and join Russia.
Right.
And Ukraine was having none of that.
Right.
And so I think that's a second reason to support Russia. But the main reason, I think, is this geopolitical thing about NATO creeping eastward. And now France is talking about putting the French Foreign Legion on the Ukrainian side. And
Are they really?
Yeah, and Sweden and Finland are joining NATO. Look at from the point of view of Russia for a second. They feel put upon. Understatement of the century. So I'm much more of a fan of Russia than of Ukraine on that war.
Okay, so
go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was going to say, so let's. I want to bring it back to. I understand your point. Point taken. I understand your point on how this ends with Israel and Hamas in Gaza.
Well, again, I returned to the issue when I was coming at you. Here's my knife. I'm kill Michael, and I've got my baby son right in front of me. And the only way you can stop me is shooting him. Who is responsible for my son's death? Me or you? Me.
I point taken, but what I'm asking is, if we take it out of that analogy and put it into this context, are you saying that, like, no matter how many, I don't want to be Kathy Newman here, and where does it end? Like, how do you see this as a peaceable conclusion?
It ends with the end of Hamas. Hamas has got to be conquered. How did World War II end? It ended with Germany and Japan being conquered. How do most wars end? With the bad guy being conquered.
But Hamas. I think the distinction is Hamas isn't a geopolitical entity, right? Germany was a country with clearly defined borders. Hamas is an organization which is not grounded in Gaza uniquely, and you can't distinguish between easily the Hamas organization and simple, peaceable Palestinians.
That's quite right. Not only should Hamas be ended, but the same thing for Hezbollah and Houthis. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And Iran, which is the puppet master behind all of these three H's, Hamas, Houthi, and Hezbollah. I think they're all trying to undermine Israel. They're all trying to attack Israel. Israel's got to defend itself.
See, what my concern is, and I'm curious to see if your concern is, I did a book on North Korea, and it's very clear that the great leader Kim Il Sung, the founder of North Korea, was a very evil person, to put it mildly, right? It's very clear to me that Mao Zedong is uniquely evil historically, worse than Hitler. Stalin is, maybe I don't know if Pol Pot would be number two or Stalin's number two. This is an Olympics of depravity and evil, right? And I'm sure you agree with me on that. You have the Korean War, where Kim Il Sung invades the South, which was authoritarian. It's hardly some kind of Gulch libertarian paradise. And the U.S. and the UN sided with South Korea. The North, you had Mao and Stalin siding with Kim Il Sung. The Korean War, they go back and forth for a few years, and the Korean people paid the price. Right, the country was leveled, and just mass death from north to south across the entire peninsula. So it seems to me analogous that you have Israel and to some extent the U.S. backing them, and on the other hand you have Hamas, but Hamas wouldn't be Hamas without Iran and whoever else behind them. But it's the Palestinian people, just like the Korean people were, who are put in the middle. And as a result of this, and in the Israelis to some extent, they're suffering, unimaginably. Is that not an accurate assessment of what the situation is, in your opinion?
Very accurate.
Okay.
I agree with what you say, that the collateral damage the people in Gaza are not quite that innocent, because I think there was a fair election, and Hamas got 90% of the vote. And then when October 7th occurred, you see the Gazans out there dancing and jumping around and giving each other candy to celebrate what happened on October 7th. What happened on October 7th was not cool. It was not nice. It was pretty nasty. I mean,
it wasn't cool. That's fair to say.
1,200 people killed, and not even killed cleanly, but tortured to death in many cases, and the rape. The thing that amazes me is you get this group called Queers for Palestine. Right. If those people went over to Gaza, they'd be killed. And then you have feminists for Hamas, and the way they treat women, and the way they treated Israeli women. They were raping them. You get all sorts of anomalies.
Walter, we are running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
I made a new friend.
You are welcome.
Pluto TV has over 300 channels and thousands of TV shows and movies for whatever mood you're in. Just open the app and something good will already be playing, because it's curated by people who love TV as much as you do. So if you're in the mood for comedy, there's 18 channels that'll make you laugh. Looking for drama? We got so much of it, you'll cry tears of joy. Reality shows, game shows, sports, Star Trek, and even more Star Trek. No matter what mood you're in, there's something on Pluto TV. Just download the app and start streaming. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.